Okay, direct your attention to the photographs on this exhibit that are labeled with photograph numbers, photograph number 12, and the call-out line. Do those depict where this item was collected?
Yes, it does.
And this was the first interior item?
Correct.
And who did the physical collection in terms of the swatching of this item?
I did.
Was Mr. Fung watching you on this item?
Yes, he was.
Now, after collecting this item from the foyer area, where did you go in the location?
We started making our way upstairs, looking as we were going for any items of evidence.
So you collected downstairs first before going upstairs?
Correct.
And when you got upstairs, did you go to the master bedroom area of the house?
We did go there.
Did you see the item that's contained in photographs 13?
Yes, I did.
And where were they?
They were at the foot of the master bedroom bed.
Right. And did you also see the item that's depicted in the photographs that are labeled 14?
Yes, I did.
And what are you doing in this photograph? Photograph that shows you holding a Q-tip.
That is a simple presumptive test for blood.
Is that the phenolphthalein test? Now, if you look closely at that photograph in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that there's some clothing on the ground. Can you see that? It's right behind the shower door. No, the one that has you doing the presumptive test. The one that has photograph number 14.
Yes.
Do you recall how that clothing got there?
One of the detectives was looking through the clothing.
Was that while you and criminalist Fung were in this master bathroom, master bedroom area?
Yes, it was.
And prior to this detective looking at this item, where was the clothing?
Clothing was in a clothes hamper. Yeah, let me see that picture.
Okay. That's fine. You can resume the witness stand. So, when the detective took the items out of the hamper, did he ever put them back in the hamper that you saw, or did he just leave them on the floor?
I don't recall if you put them back or not.
But he did take them out and put them on the floor?
Yes.
Okay, you can take that down. Do you know how the towels got on the floor?
No, I don't.
Okay. Now, after collecting item number 12, what was the next item number that you collected, or that was collected in your presence?
May I check my
Yes.
notes? After item 12, item 13 was picked up.
And after item number 13, what was picked up?
Item 14,
And who physically collected item number 13?
Mr. Fung.
What time was item number 14 collected?
Approximately 1640.
And the record should reflect that Ms. Mazzola is referring to her notes.
Okay, yes. And were you referring to the crime scene identification
Yes, I
checklist?
was.
Now, is there a time for 13 on that list, or is it just 12 and 14?
Just 12 and 14.
Your Honor, I'd just like to clarify something before I ask my next question.
Yes, at the sidebar with the court reporter, please. easily the most educational sidebar so far. All right, thank you, counsel. Proceed.
Okay, thank you. All right, and was there an item number 15 and an item number 16 that were collected? You can just answer that, yes or no.
Yes.
All right, and what time were those items collected?
I thought at approximately 5 o'clock.
All right. And that was according to your crime scene identification
Correct.
checklist? May I just have one moment, Your Honor?
Certainly.
And can you tell us the location of where, using your crime scene identification checklist, these two items were located? Just the location,
Correct.
first of 15, then of 16.
15 was collected in a downstairs bathroom trash can. 16 was collected from a bench outside the front door.
Okay. Now, I'd like to show you another tape that we've marked as People's 186, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about it if you take a look at it.
Is this from Rockingham?
Yeah, it's the beta tape from Rockingham. We could just stop for 1 second. And we're at frame 1711. So if we assume that this is correct, this would be 511.
Correct.
And in this scene, what are you and criminalist Fung doing?
We are putting items of evidence in the back of the crime scene truck.
And would these be the items of evidence that you had collected in the afternoon at Rockingham?
That's correct.
Now, are you placing anything in addition to the evidence itself in the truck at this time?
Our kits.
And what are your kits?
They are 2 cases that contain things we need to pick up evidence, package it at the scene.
Do those contain all of your packaging materials?
Yes, they do.
And in addition to the bags, the brown paper bags that we've seen, what other kinds of packaging materials do you have?
Plastics, bags, coin envelopes of varying sizes.
Okay. So at this point in time, those items are being placed in the rear of the crime scene truck.
That's correct.
And would have this been after you did the inventory for the afternoon items?
Yes.
Do you know where physically that inventory took place?
I don't know for sure, no.
Okay, let's continue.
All right, just for the record, that's 17:11 actually in 50 seconds because there's a lot in between.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. I can just stop for another second. So this is 17:11:57:02 that we're looking at. Did you just lock the crime scene truck?
Yes.
So at this time, where is all of the evidence that was collected from the morning at Rockingham?
In the back of the truck.
And all of the evidence that was collected at Bundy?
In the back of the truck.
And what about the evidence that was collected in the afternoon?
In the back of the truck.
Okay, let's continue. If we could stop for just a second, I have another question. And the crime scene identification checklist that we've been referring to, where is that at this time as you and Mr. Fung are walking away from the
That also is in the
contract?
back of the truck.
Okay, let's continue. Stop for a second. We've just stopped at 17:17:10:24. Ms. Mazzola, have you had an opportunity to look at this tape before
Yes,
today?
I have.
Right. And have you had an opportunity to take a close look at the item that Detective Van Adder is holding in his hands?
Yes.
What does that appear to be?
It appears to be the gray envelope that, at least in toxicology, that our samples arrive at the lab in, be it urine or blood,
Now, you say in toxicology you see these envelopes.
every day.
I'd just like to show you what we've marked previously as People's 163H for identification. I may approach.
Yes.
Can you show us hold up the envelope of the type that you work with every day in serology? Excuse me, in the toxicology.
It's this one.
She's referring to the darker of the gray envelopes.
Yes.
Thank you. Let's continue. Let's just stop for a moment. Now, when you're working with these envelopes in toxicology every day, are these the kinds of envelopes that are used to contain suspect's blood
Yes,
or urine?
that's correct.
All right. Let's continue. Okay, let's stop for a second. We've just stopped at 17:20:57:02. Now, before we stopped, did you see two shots or two segments showing some activity in the foyer area of
Yes.
the Rockingham location? Do you know where you were when that was occurring?
I was in the living room sitting down.
Okay. And what was it that appeared to be in Mr. Fung's hands in this videotape?
It appeared to be,
Objection, Your Honor, to what her opinion of what appears in the videotape, and she's not even present, and her opinion is no better than the jury's.
Oh,
it appears to be an envelope similar to the gray envelope.
And at this time, did either you or Mr. Fung have any of the packaging materials that you, from your crime scene truck or from the kits?
No,
Objection, Your Honor, she wasn't present, she can't say what was in the
overruled.
no.
All right. And was there,
Let me see counsel without the report of the sidebar, please. Thank you, counsel. Proceed.
Was there any other item of evidence that you collected or saw being collected after 5/11
No,
that was consistent with those shots?
no.
Okay. Can we continue now? Let's just stop for a second. Have you had the opportunity to see this portion of the tape where you and Mr. Fung are leaving the location prior to today?
Yes,
For the record, we've stopped on 17, 42, 54, 13. Now, did you have opportunity when you looked at this tape to look at the amount of heft or size of whatever is in the plastic bag?
after viewing the tapes, yes.
And was there anything that you collected or was collected in your presence after 5/11 that was consistent with that other than the analyzed evidence envelope?
No,
Objection, Your Honor.
Foundation.
First of all, it's a leading question.
Sustain. Phrase the question, jury should disregard the answer.
Did you collect anything, or was anything collected in your presence after 5/11 that was consistent with the size of what was in that envelope? Excuse me, bag.
no,
And when you were carrying the bag out, I'll strike that. Okay, let's continue. Now, you said that after the Griffin hearing, you had a conversation with Mr. Fung where you went over
Objection.
who collected,
Objection as to what he went over in the conversation.
where you went,
Sorry to testify
Thank you.
too.
where you went over what had been collected and who did it.
right.
Do you remember any conversation about item number 17, the vial of blood?
I honestly can't remember if we had a conversation or not.
Did that, in your mind, appear to be a significant incident, the circumstances surrounding the collection of or the receipt of that item?
No.
Why didn't it seem to be significant?
The laboratory receives samples of suspects' blood or urine all the time. It was nothing unusual.
Did you make it a point when you were getting ready to leave the Rockingham location after 5 o'clock to make a mental note of everything that was happening and the sequence in which it was happening?
Not really, no.
Or make a mental note of the time that things were happening after 5 o'clock?
Not really, no.
Did you have any idea that those circumstances were going to be raised as issues later on in a case?
No.
Your Honor, I'd like to read from the Griffin hearing transcript. It's at page 762.
At what line?
It's line 1 on 762 through line 7 on 763.
Mr. Neufeld?
I didn't hear what he said.
He's ready.
I want to ask you whether at the Griffin hearing you gave the following answers to the following questions. Question. Oh, excuse me. It's 761, line 25, where it starts. Question. And what happened? What time did you finally leave Rockingham for the second time? Answer. Let me check my notes. Approximately 1,700 hours. Question. That's the time that you left Rockingham approximately? Answer. Approximately. Question. Can you just tell me what the source of that approximation is, ma'am? Answer. From one of the last items that was picked up on our way out. Question. And which item was that? That was the last item picked up. Answer. It was sample item 16. Question. And what time was it picked up? Answer. Approximately 1,700 hours. Question. And is it your recollection, ma'am, that as soon as you picked up that item, that you and Mr. Fung left the premises? Answer. It was a little bit after that. Question. When you say a little bit after, do you mean 5 minutes, or are we talking about as much as half an hour? Answer. Not as much as half an hour. Question. So would it just be a few minutes? Answer. Yes. Question. Were you with Mr. Fung the entire time after you picked up that last item at 1,700 hours until you departed for your next destination? Answer. I believe I was. Yes. Question. And was anything else, was any other evidence collected after that last item before you actually left Rockingham? Answer. No. No other item? Answer. No. No other items were logged in? No. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
Okay. Now, why did you testify that you left at approximately 1,700 hours at the Griffin hearing?
Because that's what I thought the time was after we picked up the last two items that I personally saw.
And when you were referring to something at the Griffin hearing, when you testified to that, what were you referring to?
As to where I got the time?
Yeah.
The crime scene checklist.
Okay. And did you look on the crime scene checklist? Perhaps we can have that item. I think it's 1007, 1107 rather. taking a look at the crime scene identification checklist. It's 1107. Do you recognize this document?
Yes,
Now, when was this created? Was this created on the 13th or after the 13th?
after the 13th.
Okay. When you were answering the questions at the Griffin hearing as to when you left, did you look at this page?
No,
And this page indicates that item number 17 was recovered at 17:20?
that's what it says, yes.
Is that your handwriting? The 17:20?
1720 is, yes.
That's 5:20.
Right.
Right, so had you looked at this page when you were testifying at the Griffin hearing, would you have testified differently?
Yes.
And what would have you testified to?
That we,
Sustain.
Objection as to what?
Speculation.
Okay.
Sustain.
Now, as to the question that you were asked at the Griffin hearing about your recollection, thank you, that as soon as you picked up that item, that you and Mr. Fung left the premises, when you said that you think it was a little bit after that, what was that recollection based on?
which item are you,
You were asked whether you left after you collected 15 and 16, and you said it was a little bit after that.
Right.
What was that recollection based on?
the fact that Mr. Fung spent some time talking to the detectives, so it would have been after that.
What were you doing in that interval between the time that you got back to the location after locking everything in your crime scene truck and when you came out with the plastic bag?
For a short time, I was with Mr. Fung and the detectives and the photographer. After a while, the photographer and I went into the living room and sat down.
And what was your mental state at that time?
Exhaustion.
Did you have a clear sense of how much time was going by when you were sitting down on the couch?
No.
And when you testified that you believed, when you were asked whether you were with Mr. Fung the entire time between 1700 hours until you departed, and you said that you believed that you were, what was the basis of that belief?
It just felt like a few minutes. Didn't feel like a long time at all.
Now, were any other items logged in on the 13th after 15 and 16?
As to having been received on the 13th?
In other words, on the 13th, did you or Mr. Fung in your presence make any paperwork on the crime scene identification checklist logging in any item after 16?
No.
And that was done on the 14th?
I believe so, yes.
And why was it that that was done on the 14th?
Because our checklist was locked in the back of the truck. After we were done and ready to leave Rockingham, we had to get back to the lab to prepare the other evidence.
At some point after leaving the location for the last time on the 13th, did Mr. Fung say anything to you regarding a vial of blood from the defendant?
Sustain.
Is that hearsay?
Yes, it is.
Okay, fine.
All right, why don't we take our noon recess at this point? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the lunch hour. Please remember all of my admonitions to you. Do not discuss the case amongst yourselves, form any opinions about the case, conduct any deliberations until the matter has been submitted to you. Do not allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. We'll stand in recess until 1:30. Ms. Mazzola, you may step down. You're ordered to return 1:30. All right? Thank you. Yes, sir.
Are we going to be in session at all tomorrow afternoon under your current plan?
Not in session.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Right. All right, Deputy Magnar, let's have the jurors, please. The witness stand. All right, the record should reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Ms. Andrea Mazzola is again on the witness stand on direct examination by Mr. Goldberg. Good afternoon, Ms. Mazzola.
Good afternoon.
You're reminded you're still under oath. Mr. Goldberg.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We were talking about when you left the Rockingham location, and you were explaining why it was that when you went into the vehicle, you didn't continue filling out the crime scene identification checklist, and I was unclear on that. What was the reason?
Because the identification checklist was in the back of the truck.
Okay. Now, when you got back to the laboratory, approximately what time did you arrive?
Approximately 6:30 or so, somewhere in there, quarter
Okay.
after 6.
And did you fill out or continue filling out the crime scene identification checklist then?
No.
What was your priority when you were back at the laboratory?
The main priority was to get the swatches which were collected at the scenes to be drying.
All right. Now, I'll get into that in just a second, but I wanted to ask a few clarifying questions. When you were sitting on the couch at the Rockingham location before you left, I guess this would have been after 5/11, were your eyes open or closed?
I believe they were closed.
At what point did you close your eyes?
Probably the second I sat down.
Do you, did you fall asleep?
No, I wasn't asleep.
And did you lose track of time when you were sitting on the couch?
Yes.
Were you tired at that point in time?
Yes, I was.
Why was that?
Because we had been up on our feet working constantly for 12 solid hours.
Okay. Now, you said on direct examination, when I was asking you about collecting the glove and the watch cap, the cap, that they were in close proximity or touching. Which was it?
Reviewing photographs, they were in very close proximity to each other.
Okay, and what was the significance, again, of them being in close proximity?
Well, since they were so close, chances are that any trace evidence would have been on one, on the other. They were not separated by any great distance to preserve trace evidence, just located on one and not the other.
Were they close enough so that you could not foreclose the possibility that at some point they'd come into contact?
They were that close.
And when two items come into contact, is that typically how transfers of trace evidence occur?
Yes.
Now, when you got back to the laboratory and you began the drying process, what role, if any, did you play in the drying process?
At first, I started helping Mr. Fung by preparing a few of the items for drying, taking them out and putting them in the labeled test tubes. But he was much faster than I was, so he suggested I just label the tubes for him.
Are you familiar with the technique that Mr. Fung uses to remove the swatches from the plastic baggies and put them into the test tubes?
I know which method he uses.
And what is that?
He places the test tube near the opening of the mouth of the bag and uses the bag to push the swatches into the test tube.
By manipulating from the outside of the bag?
Right.
Now, do you use the same technique?
No, I was not that good. I would use disposable pipettes, glass pipettes, and I would put the pipette into the bag and bring the swatches into the test tube and throw away the pipette.
Did you throw away the pipette for each sample?
Yes.
Do you know whether you did more than one this way?
I think I did more than one, yes.
Okay. And if you're using the glass pipette on the sample and you then go to the control, do you use the same glass pipette?
No,
So you use a different glass pipette for the sample and then a different glass pipette for the control?
correct.
All right. Do you recall exactly how many you did before you stopped
No, I
doing them on
don't.
this?
No, I don't.
Okay, but you think it may have been more than one?
More than one, yes.
And what did you do after you stopped actually helping out in the drying process by putting the items in the test tubes?
I started labeling the test tubes for Mr. Fung.
And was he then doing the physical manipulations of getting the swatches from the plastic baggies into the test tubes?
Yes, he was.
When you and Mr. Fung were working together in this process, did you do it in an assembly line fashion with all of the items laid out, or was it one at a time?
One item was worked on at a time.
And after the items were placed in their test tubes, were they placed in the coin envelope?
Yes, the test tubes were placed back in the coin envelope.
And then where did they go? I mean, after this whole process is over, where do they go?
Okay, they were placed in a cardboard box lid, lying down, single layer. The box lids were then placed in a cabinet, which we used just for drying the cloth swatches.
And approximately what time would you say you left that evening, if you know?
Offhand, I don't know.
All right. When you left that evening, did you have to take Mr. Fung anywhere?
Yes,
Where was that?
I had to take him back to the firearms section to get his car.
Okay. Now, directing your attention to the next day, June the 14th of 1994. Did you enter the evidence processing room that morning?
Yes, I did.
And for what purpose did you enter the evidence processing room?
To go to work. We had to finish processing the swatches.
Were you present at a time when Mr. Fung removed some evidence from item number 9, the glove that was found at the Rockingham location?
I was in the same room, yes.
Okay. And were you present later in the morning when Mr. Yamauchi from the crime lab came in and took some samples?
Yes.
And did you see how he took the samples?
I wasn't paying,
Samples of what? Just his face?
Stay, sustain.
Did he take some samples of some of the items that came from the Bundy location?
I believe he did.
And did he take them out of the room or work with them in the room?
They were worked on in the room.
Now, that morning, did you continue filling out the documentation, specifically the crime scene identification checklist?
Yes.
I'd like to take another look back at 1107 for identification. think this is the rear of the field notes that lists items 17, 18, and 19 on it. Did you find it? Ms. Mazzola, direct your attention to this page of the exhibit that's been marked 1107 for identification. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
What is it?
They are notes in my handwriting regarding items 17, 18, and 19.
And was this created on the morning of the 14th?
Yes.
And how did it come into being?
Mr. Fung had received item 17.
Objection, Your Honor. She would say she's not testifying from what she personally observed.
Or we'll rephrase the question.
All right, were you directed to make this document, or did you do it on your own?
I was directed to make this document.
And what were you directed to do?
To write down the item numbers and a brief description of what each item number was.
Was that Mr. Fung who told you to do that?
Yes.
Did he give you any specifics in terms of what form he wanted you to put it on? At
Not-
this time?
At this time, no.
All right, so what is it that you wrote it down on?
It was back of the page of the field notes.
All right. And are these the items that you wrote at that time in the morning down on this page?
Yes.
And at some point, did you show this document to Mr. Fung, or did he see it?
He saw it.
And as a result of that, did you then generate another document?
Yes.
And why did you do that?
Because he wanted it placed on one of the forms that we use, the front face of the field notes.
Okay, is the form that we are looking at now an official Los Angeles Police Department form that's used for these purposes, or is it just a blank piece of paper on the reverse of?
It's just the reverse of a piece of paper.
Okay, so he wanted it on what form?
On one of the evidence collection sheets.
I'd now like to take a look at also 1107, and it has sample item 18, 17, and 19. Now, is this exhibit part of the official crime scene identification checklist type form that you use when you're out in the field generally?
Yes.
Right. And did you create parts of this exhibit?
Yes, I did.
Can you distinguish between the different kinds of handwriting on there and tell us which is yours and which isn't?
The sample item number 18, 17, 19 are mine. They received in serology under 18 is mine. 17, the location of item received from Van Adder, is Mr. Fung's writing. My writing is the writing under the item collected for that item number, and Mr. Fung's writing is removed from. Mine is item 9, and his is the hairs and fibers.
Okay, now, did you do this document on your own initially, or did Mr. Fung do it together with you?
Initially, it was mine.
And then did you call Mr. Fung's attention to it.
Yes, I did.
Now, when you put in the time for item number 17, 1720, is that what it says? 1720. Where did you get that from?
From Mr. Fung,
Is that 520?
yes.
It came from him and not an analyzed evidence envelope or another piece of paper?
He told me, I don't,
Okay.
so-
And where did you get the time, 9 o'clock, for the remove from item 9, 19?
That, I just glanced at the clock while he was working on it.
And what about the 8:30 time for the received, for item number 18?
That was from Mr. Fung.
Okay. Were you present when any pair of sneakers was handed over?
No.
So after you created this document and then brought it to Mr. Fung's attention, what happened?
He wanted the numbers, sample item numbers changed.
And why was that?
He wanted to keep the items in chronological order as they had been received.
And based upon your own experience as a criminalist, is there any advantage to doing that in terms of other reports that need to be done, such as property reports?
Well, when they're kept in chronological order as to the day they were received, on the property reports, you can put all of the items received on the same day on the property report. If they were out of order, you'd have to generate a new property report for each item.
Okay. So was this done in order to cut down on the number of property reports that would be necessary?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness so that she can look at the document itself?
Yes.
Thank you.
Either counsel, when they're examining or being available for cross-examination, may approach without permission of the court.
Direct your attention back to item number 19. There appear to be some erasures under there. Do you know what was originally said?
Let's see. Looks like it's hairs and fibers, and then found on item number 9.
And now it says removed
Removed
from
from.
item number 9.
Correct.
Okay. And the printing that says removed from item number 9, well, excuse me, the removed from, whose printing is that?
The removed from is Mr. Fung.
And the item number 9?
That's mine.
Right. Now, what about where it says on item number 17, received from Van Adder? That's Mr. Fung's printing?
That's Mr. Fung.
And did it appear that there were some erasures there and that there was something else at one time underneath that item?
Looks like serology SID.
Okay. Do you have any recollection of why that was erased and the other, and received from Van Adder put in there?
I believe I was trying to put them in order that Mr. Fung wanted, 17, 18, and 19, and had started to write received in serology, meaning the tennis shoes, and Mr. Fung wanted it kept 18 first, then 17, then 19.
And he just changed those
Right.
item
They
numbers?
would, yeah.
Now, did Mr. Fung ever tell you anything to the effect of, well, it's not coming in for a hearsay purpose, Your Honor, just,
We approach him at all?
okay.
Please. Thank you, counsel. Proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Mazzola, did Mr. Fung ever tell you simply to start over again with a new form?
No.
Right. Now, later in the morning, did you and Mr. Fung go to another location to collect additional evidence?
Yes.
Where was that?
It was at the LAPD print shed.
And can you tell us the time that you got there approximately?
May I look at my notes?
Sure.
Refreshing recollection by looking at the notes right now.
Yes. Ms.
Thank you.
Mazzola, which form are you looking at?
I am looking at the vehicle search checklist.
Right.
It was approximately 10:30.
And when you arrived at the print shed, did you see the Bronco that had been earlier parked in front of the Rockingham location?
Yes.
Did you see how the Bronco was opened?
Yes, I did.
How was that?
The Bronco had to be opened by 2 detectives
Where did they come from?
from the burglary auto detail.
And how did they do it?
They had to use a, I believe they're called a Slim Jim, to pop the lock.
Okay. And after that was done, did you and Mr. Fung then begin collecting evidence from the Bronco?
Yes.
What role did you play in the evidence collection procedure in terms of the Bronco?
I was holding the flashlight, making the sketch, passing him the supplies that he needed.
When you say supplies, what are you talking about?
Coin envelopes, plastic bags, labeling with the item numbers.
Okay. Perhaps at this point I could bring up People's 172 for identification. Yeah. So I don't know whether you can see this. I'd like to draw your attention to one of the call-out lines that does not have a number on it. It's just a red dot, but it hooks up to a photograph that has an item number 33 and depicts the brake pedals in the Bronco. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And when you were at the location, did you do any testing on the brake pedals and the gas pedal as depicted in that photograph?
Yes, I did a phenolphthalein test.
Did you do that personally, or did Mr. Fung do that?
I did that personally.
Can you tell us what's involved in a phenolphthalein test?
It is simply taking a cotton tip swab, dampening it with a little distilled water, shaking off the excess, applying the swab to the area, adding a drop of the reagent. If there's no color change, we add a drop of hydrogen peroxide. If it is negative, nothing happens. If it is positive, it turns like a magenta hot pink.
And did you do that phenolphthalein test for each one of the 3 pedals that are depicted in the photograph that has the call-out line with no number on it?
Yes,
What was the result?
and I check my notes.
Sure.
All right, Ms. Mazzola, could you try to keep your voice up? All right, thank you.
renal failing tests were positive.
Did you collect any stains from that location?
No,
Those 3 petals?
no,
And did Mr. Fung collect any stains?
no.
Right. Now, with respect to the stains that are on this Bronco board, were there additional stains on the Bronco that are not depicted here? If you want to, you can look back on your notes.
Yes, there were other stains.
Okay, for example, was there a stain number 21, or 20, rather?
Yes, there was.
Where was that located?
That was located in the passenger door near the top edge of the passenger door.
Now, with respect to the stains that we see here that are depicted on this exhibit, let's start with the stain number 30 and 31. Do you recall specifically seeing those, or just generally that you know that there were a lot of stains in the Bronco?
Objection, Your Honor, to the general law.
Sustain, rephrase the
All
question.
right. Do you recall specifically seeing, well, let me ask it this way. Do you recall specifically seeing all of the stains that are depicted here, with the exceptions of 304 and 305 rather? Or do you just have a general recollection that you saw stains in there?
I have a general recollection of small stains, yes.
All right. Thank you. You can retake the witness stand. I'd like to show you the vehicle search checklist that's previously been marked as People's 189 for identification. Do you recognize that?
Yes,
And is that the documentation that you were filling out while you and Mr. Fung were collecting the stains from the Bronco?
yes,
And does that list all of the various stains that were obtained from the Bronco on that date? Collected, I should say.
yes,
Now, when you're collecting stains from a vehicle such as this, do you collect every single drop of every single stain in the vehicle?
no.
What do you do?
You, as a normal crime scene, you take a representative sample.
And by that, do you mean, what do you mean when you say representative sample?
You collect samples from the various items in the different locations. You would not collect every single spot. If there were 5 spots near each other, you would not collect all 5 spots.
Okay, but let's say that you have a situation where there are 10 spots, and you decide that you're going to collect 6 of them. Do you collect as much of those 6 spots that you decide to collect as you can?
Yes,
All right. But in terms of the number of spots, you don't necessarily collect every single spot?
no.
Now, when you were watching Mr. Fung doing the collection, did you form any opinion as to whether he was collecting enough of the stains?
I did not form any opinion, no.
All right. How well could you see specifically what was going on in terms of the collection that was happening on the console?
I could not see very well because it was dark, and he was looking for the stains with the flashlight.
Now, when you collected these stains in the Bronco with Mr. Fung and they were packaged, did you follow the same procedure that you've described before in terms of the inventory before you're finished?
Yes,
And what did you do with these after you'd done the inventory?
they were put in paper bags to take with us.
Where did you take them?
We took them to the lab.
And when you got back to the lab, did you go through the drying process with these
Yes.
stains?
Yes.
Now, at this drying process, was your role different than in the drying process that occurred on the evening of the 13th?
Yes.
How did it differ?
I was more involved with putting the swatches into the individual test tubes.
And what technique were you using to do that?
I was using the glass pipettes.
And what technique was Mr. Fung using
He was manipulating the swatches from the outside.
in the way that you previously described?
Correct.
And were the two of you working on one item simultaneously, or how did that work?
We were working on different items, but we were working at separate tables.
And again, when you were working on your items, did you do it in an assembly line fashion or one at a time?
One at a time.
Now, after these items were put out to dry, did you participate in the packaging process?
Yes.
And what did the packaging process involve?
You take the dry swatches, you put them in a small paper bindle, which is just a piece of paper, clean paper folded up, put the swatches in, seal it, write the DR number on it, the item number. These go back in the original coin envelopes,
And did you do that in assembly line fashion or one at a time?
one at a time.
And after the drying process was done on the various items that have been collected on the 13th and 14th, did you participate with Mr. Fung in writing the property reports?
He wrote the property reports.
He did that.
He did that.
And on June the 16th of 1994, did you see the evidence?
That morning, yes.
And what condition was it in when you saw it?
Sealed boxes,
So at that time, everything that had been collected was sealed up.
yes.
Did you see it actually being brought to the evidence control unit?
No,
Was that the last time that you'd seen it?
yes.
May I just have one moment to look at my notes here? Thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Neufeld? Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a brief recess to shift gears here for about 10 minutes. Please remember all my admonitions to you. If you'll just step back into the jury room as soon as we reorganize, we'll get started again. All right? Let's take 10 minutes. All right, Deputy McNair, let's have the jurors, please. Let the record reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. Ms. Andrea Mazzola is again on the witness stand, now on cross-examination by Mr. Neufeld. Good afternoon again, Ms. Mazzola.
Good afternoon.
You're reminded you are still under oath. Mr. Neufeld.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, it's been a month since Mr. Shapiro introduced me in the courtroom.
Certainly.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Peter Neufeld, and it is my pleasure to be one of the lawyers assisting in the representation of Mr. Simpson. Ms. Mazzola, did you watch any of Dennis Fung's testimony at this trial? Or hear any of it on the radio?
Just bits and pieces.
And was that at work or at home?
At work, I don't watch it at home.
Did you listen to any of it at home?
No.
So it's on the television at work, though?
Yes.
And it's on people's radios at work?
Yes.
And that's at the SID laboratories here?
That's correct.
And other than Dennis Fung's testimony, did you watch or listen to portions of any of the other witnesses' testimony during this trial?
Maybe just bits and pieces. I don't make it a practice to listen.
Well, Dennis Fung had mentioned that the radio was on in different places in the laboratory. Is there a radio in toxicology?
There,
The question about is there a radio in toxicology is an appropriate question. You can answer that.
yes, there is.
And are people in toxicology listening to the trial?
Our radio in tox does not get very good reception. We're lucky if we hear anything at all.
I understand that, but given the limited reception that you do have, ma'am, do people in toxicology have it tuned to the trial?
They try, yes.
Okay. And not only in toxicology, but are there other radios in serology, for instance?
I don't know what goes on in serology.
How about in the evidence processing unit? Is there a radio there?
I believe there is.
And you said there are also televisions at work.
One
And is that in the cafeteria?
in the lunchroom, yes.
And in the televisions in the lunchroom, does that also broadcast the trial?
Yes.
And so employees at SID can come in and watch the trial when they have free time.
They can.
And you've seen bits and pieces of the trial on that television?
When I'm in and out of there, yes.
Okay. Well, do you ever have your lunch there?
I tend to take my lunch when the court was recessed for lunch.
I'm sorry, what?
I took my lunch when the court was taking theirs. I don't like to watch the trial.
No. I don't mean, you take your lunch every day at SID at the same time the court recesses?
After the court is out of session is when I go and eat my lunch, or we go out to lunch.
Okay. But there've been some times where you have seen bits and
Right.
pieces on the television of the trial testimony?
Yes.
Okay. Now, going back to August, Mr. Goldberg had referred to your testifying at a hearing. I believe it's on August 23rd. Is that correct?
I'm not sure the exact date.
All right. Well, the day before you testified, Dennis Fung testified, didn't he?
I guess.
Well, ma'am,
Overruled. No, it'll stand.
just calling your attention again to the hearings that took place during that third week in August of 1994. Did you hear on the radio or watch some of those hearings on television?
I don't remember if I did or not.
Well, Ms. Mazzola, this was a case I think that you referred to on direct examination when you were called to come over here in early August or in late August as the case. Is that correct?
It was referred to me as the case. I don't refer to it as that.
Fine. But it was a very high-profile case at the Scientific Investigation Division of the LA Police Department, was it not?
Yes, it was.
And everyone talked about it quite frequently, did they not?
They really did not talk about it frequently because we were told not to talk amongst ourselves.
Well, ma'am, let me ask you this. You were one of the only two criminalists who collected the evidence at the two crime scenes at Rockingham and Bundy on those days, right?
Right?
And you were certainly interested in the way that collection was being depicted or portrayed on television, weren't you?
Mildly interested.
I'm sorry?
A little interested, yes.
Okay. And during that time, would you stipulate that Dennis Fung testified on August 22nd? All right. Well, ma'am, assuming, if you would, that Dennis Fung testified on August 22nd, the day before you did, as best you can recall, were you mildly interested in what Dennis Fung had to say about yours and his collection of evidence before a national television audience?
I don't recall if I was listening to it or not. I honestly don't recall.
Well, were you listening on August 22nd? I'm sorry, withdrawing. You said earlier that the first time you heard that you were needed in court was the morning of August 23rd, or the morning that you testified. Is that right?
That's right.
Were you listening on the television and radio when it was said in open court on the afternoon of the 22nd that your attendance would probably be necessary the next day?
No.
Or will answer stand?
No.
Well, did anyone call you the afternoon of August 22nd or the evening of August 22nd and say that defense counsel has requested your presence and you may have to be on the witness stand the following day?
Right,
No.
that does assume facts that aren't in evidence. We don't know what date it was. Sometime in August.
As an officer of the court, Your Honor, I'm representing when Mr.
Counsel, I
Fung's
know that,
testimony
but-
was and when hers was.
You can ask the question, same answer, the day before you were called to testify.
Okay. Now, in preparation for your testimony today, have you reviewed any notes?
Yes.
And what notes would those be, ma'am?
Crime scene notes. I was able to watch some videos, look at some still photography.
Did you review any transcripts?
Yes.
And which transcripts did you review?
I believe it's called a Griffin hearing.
Whose testimony?
Mine.
Did you review the testimony of any other witnesses from that hearing?
No.
Did you review the testimony of any other witnesses during the course of any other proceedings of this trial, of this case?
No.
And you mentioned that you've also viewed some videotapes.
Correct.
Approximately how many videotapes have you reviewed?
I lost count. I don't know.
Perhaps dozens?
I don't think it was dozens. No, not
Perhaps
that
a
many.
dozen?
Maybe a dozen or less.
Okay. And are all those videotapes shown to you by the district attorneys in this case?
Yes.
Were any of them showed to you by police officers?
No.
Now, the only time other than a trial where you testified in this case was during that hearing in late August, August 23rd of 1994. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, before you testified in that proceeding, had you met with any district attorneys concerning your involvement in this case?
No.
And prior to August 23rd, when you testified, had you discussed your involvement in this case with any superiors at LAPD?
I do not believe so, no.
And prior to your testifying and taking the witness stand here on August 23rd, 1994, did you speak to any defense attorney?
No.
Did any defense attorney suggest to you any answers before you got on the witness stand?
No.
Did any prosecutor suggest any answers to you before you got on the witness stand on August 23rd?
No.
Now, since August 23rd, Ms. Mazzola, have you had a number of discussions with employees of the Los Angeles Police Department, including the people at SID?
I've talked to people at work, yes.
Well, have you had discussions with them about your involvement in this case?
Yes.
And let's see, have you talked to Michelle Kessler?
Yes.
And who is Michelle Kessler?
She is now the laboratory director.
And on how many different occasions have you talked to the laboratory director, Michelle Kessler, about your involvement in this case since August 23rd?
A few.
And would those different sessions be in her office?
Not necessarily. Out in the hall, passing by. Informal.
Were they all informal?
No, maybe one or two were in her office, but that's
Those
about
would be
it.
more formal.
If you want to call it formal.
And during the 1 and 2, no, just unless you do.
Well,
Okay.
They're not very formal there, so.
All right, during the one or two sessions that you had with your boss, Ms. Kessler, in her office, were any other people present?
Yes.
And who were those people who were present? Well, I'm sorry, let's start with the first time that you met with Ms. Kessler since August 23rd and discussed your involvement in this case.
Oh, I don't know who was present the first time.
Were there other people present, though?
I can't remember. I honestly can't
Do you know
remember.
approximately what month it was?
No,
Was it in the fall?
I don't know.
Well, how about the second time you met with Ms. Kessler to discuss your involvement in this case since August 23rd? Who else was with her then?
I believe Greg Matheson and Colin Yamauchi.
And do you remember what month that was in?
And that was just this month, it's very recent.
And you said there may have been a third time. Was there a third time that you met with Ms. Kessler?
I don't know.
To the best of your recollection, it was just two occasions
Two that I can recollect, yes.
in her office, and the other instances where you discussed this case with her were all more casually in the hallway. Is that your testimony?
It was more or less passing how I'm doing, are you ready, that sort of thing.
Now, aside from Ms. Kessler and Mr. Matheson, on that one occasion, Ms. Kessler's office, have you also discussed your involvement in this case with Mr. Matheson?
Separately, not really, no.
Have you discussed your involvement in this case since August 23rd with Dennis Fung?
We've talked, yes.
Well, in fact, after you testified on August 23rd, you and Dennis Fung had a long discussion about who did what with respect to collection in this case, didn't you?
Oh,
Yes.
And in fact, during that discussion, it was your testimony of August 23rd which precipitated that meeting between you and Mr. Fung. Isn't that correct?
I don't know if it was the testimony that,
Well, Ms. Mazzola, isn't it true that when you had the meeting with Dennis Fung, after you testified on August 23rd, he told you that he disagreed with your recollection of what you testified to at August 23rd? Isn't that correct?
sustained.
How long after the how long after you testified on August 23rd was it that you had this meeting with Dennis Fung?
I have no idea.
And during that meeting with Dennis Fung, didn't he state to you that he had a different recollection than you had? One second. He had a different-
Sustained. State to you.
It's not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, Your Honor. It's being offered to show that he stated it. And
Sidebar.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, counsel. You may rephrase the question.
Thank you. After you testified under oath on August 23rd, 1994, Ms. Mazzola, when you met with Dennis Fung, didn't he review with you his recollection as to who collected which items at Bundy and Rockingham?
Yes,
And would you agree, ma'am, that his recollection of who collected which items at Rockingham and Bundy in that meeting were different and contradicted your testimony at August 23rd?
I-
It calls for conclusion and yours.
It's her state of mind.
Overruled. You can answer the question.
I don't know. We talked about who collected what because it seemed like it was going to be a big deal, rather than us working as a team. They want,
Ms. Mazzola, this morning you testified that Dennis Fung collected the drops numbers 4, 5, and 6 at Rockingham. Is that correct?
Overruled.
may I check my notes to see which drops are 4, 5, and 6?
Please do.
Yes,
And isn't it fact, Ms. Mazzola, that when you testified on August 23rd under oath, you testified that you personally collected every drop at Rockingham?
Seize the phone, Deputy Magnera.
I have a page, a line, citation.
One moment. Page 698, beginning at line 22.
Do you have it, Mr. Goldberg?
Yes.
All right, proceed.
Ms. Mazzola, you said a moment ago that you testified this morning on direct examination that it is now your recollection that Mr. Fung, and not you, collected the drops, item numbers 4, 5, and 6. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And just so we can be very clear as to what items 4, 5, and 6 are, may I pull out one of the exhibits?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Mr. Scheck, you want to assist Mr. Neufeld there? Good.
Ms. Mazzola, could you please step down from the witness stand, with the court's permission?
Ms. Mazzola, would you try to keep your voice up, please? All right, thank you.
Ms. Mazzola, would you please point out for the jury, so I don't block them, where drops 4, 5, and 6 are on the diagram, which is People's Exhibit 120.
Okay, 4 is right here. I can't hear you. Sorry. 4 is right here in the street.
Indicating in photograph A, almost directly in front of the number 360 on the curb.
5 is right here in the driveway, just outside of the gate.
And by the way, Ms. Mazzola, is number 5 also reflected in photograph A on the driveway?
Yes.
Okay. And could you now tell us where number 6 is, please?
And 6 is right here.
indicating on photograph C on the same exhibit, a card that is toward the rear of item number 5 and toward the left of another card. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, ma'am, this morning when you testified, you said that it was now your current recollection that items 4, 5, and 6 were collected by Dennis Fung and not by you. Is that correct?
I think that's the state's testimony on
Overruled.
Is that correct?
I believe so.
And isn't it true, Ms. Mazzola, that you can stay there for 1 minute because we're going to come back to the board. Now, when you testified on August 23rd, by the way, when you testified on August 23rd, like this trial, it was a proceeding where you testified under oath. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, when you testified on August 23rd of 1994, it was a mere 2 months after the incident, correct?
Yes.
Okay, whereas today you're testifying almost 10 months after the incident. Is that correct?
Yes.
When you testified on August 23rd under oath, were you asked these questions and did you give these answers? Question. And what items of evidence did you personally collect at Rockingham during that first visit? Answer. A red stain on the door of the Bronco and the red stains leading up the driveway to the front of the house. Were you asked that question? Did you give that answer?
I believe so.
You can sit down now. Yeah. And in fact, Ms. Mazzola, was it during the meeting you had with Dennis Fung, after you testified on August 23rd, where he suggested to you that he had collected some of those stains at Rockingham? Did it happen at that meeting?
I don't recall if it did or not.
Well, at that meeting that you had with Dennis Fung, didn't you and he then begin to put notations down on a pre-existing field report?
We were making notes, yes.
Well,
All right. Would you hand that to Mr. Cochran, please?
I don't know if the, can you focus it a little bit or not? So, all right. That's fine. Ms. Mazzola, do you recognize that document?
Yes.
What is it?
A collection report.
And is it the collection report for the items of evidence collected at Rockingham?
Yes.
And are the items, which I just referred to as the drops, the Rockingham drops, if you will, are they included on that list?
Yes.
And are they noted on that list in the left-hand column by either a photo number or an ID number?
Yes.
All right. And if you now go over to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns. There's a column that says by. Is that correct?
Yes,
And what would go in that column ordinarily would be the initials of the person who actually personally collected the item. Is that correct?
if at the time it was necessary, yes.
Right, but that's what that column is for, correct?
If the person collecting the evidence deems it's necessary to put the initials, yes.
When you filled out this report on that day, that entire column for every single item at Rockingham was left blank. Is that correct?
Yes,
Now, when you had the meeting with Dennis Fung, you had a photocopy of this document with you, did you not?
yes,
And during the meeting with Dennis Fung, he expressed to you his recollection of which items he collected, correct?
we were discussing it.
Did he discuss with you and explain to you his recollection of which items he collected, Ms. Mazzola?
I believe so, yes.
And when he did that, he said to you that it's his recollection that he collected items 4, 5, and 6, correct? During that discussion.
I don't remember.
Well, have you had any other discussions with Dennis Fung about which items he collected, other than this one meeting that occurred after you testified under oath on August 23rd?
I don't recall.
And when you had this meeting with Dennis Fung, you took notes, correct?
Yes,
And you made entries in that column where it says by, is that correct?
yes,
And for items number 4, 5, and 6, you put in that column by Fung, did you not?
yes,
And it's those notes that you made when Dennis Fung spoke to you after August 23rd that you are in part relying on today when you testify as to who collected what. Is that correct?
For that column, no.
You're not at all relying on those notes to refresh your recollection as to who collected what?
No.
All right. Are there any documents at all in this case which identify which of you collected which items?
On some of the videotapes, it shows who is collecting which items.
All right, and it shows you collecting a hat and it shows you collecting a glove, correct?
Correct.
Is there any videotape that you've seen that shows which bloodstains you're collecting as opposed to Mr. Fung?
There are a few instances, yes.
And in which videotapes are you referring to? Why don't you tell us which item it shows Mr. Fung collecting?
The Bundy scene shows me collecting some of the blood, but I know that Mr. Fung also collected some of the blood at Bundy.
Is there any videotape that shows Mr. Fung collecting any blood at Bundy?
I don't believe there's any videotape of him personally collecting.
Is there any videotape showing Mr. Fung collecting any blood at Rockingham?
I don't believe so.
All right, so if there's no videotape showing Mr. Fung collecting the blood at Rockingham, are there any reports that were filled out contemporaneous to this incident where it identifies Mr. Fung as the person who collected blood drops at Rockingham?
Would you please rephrase the question?
Were there any documents filled out contemporaneous to June 13th and June 14th identifying Mr. Fung as the person who was collecting any of the drops at Rockingham?
I don't believe so.
So when you testified today, ma'am, in the absence of, I'm sorry, one last question. There's no videotapes and there's no documents. Are there any still photographs showing Mr. Fung collecting any of the blood drops at Rockingham?
I don't believe so.
So in the absence of any videotapes, photographs, or documents, you're testifying today based on your independent recollection of what transpired back on June 13th. Is that correct?
The videotapes help me to remember what happened on that morning.
Ma'am, are there any videotapes at all which show Mr. Fung collecting a single blood drop?
I believe there's one at Bundy.
Where Mr. Fung is collecting the blood drop?
Mm-hmm.
A moment ago, you
Excuse me. Is that yes or no?
Yes.
All right.
A moment ago, you said that there was no videotape of Mr. Fung collecting any blood drops. Is that correct?
It shows,
Overruled. Proceed.
it shows both of us at the one area where blood was collected. It shows me collecting some, and it shows Mr. Fung collecting some.
Shows Mr. Fung actually swatching some at Bundy?
Yes.
Okay, and which drop is that he's collecting at Bundy?
It was, let me refer to
On the
my-
videotape.
Right, I need to refer
Go
to my
ahead.
notes to find out which
Wait,
one.
wait. Ms. Mazzola, let Mr. Neufeld finish asking you the question before you start answering. Mr. Neufeld, let her finish answering before you ask the next one. Thank you.
Let's see. It's photo ID number 110.
And what are you referring to?
I'm referring to the evidence collection sheet.
Mr. Neufeld.
Okay. And do you know what property item that is?
Let me see. $45.
And that's not one of the Bundy blood drops, is it?
It is a blood sample taken from Bundy
And where is it taken from at Bundy?
on a rail.
Ma'am, are there any videotapes at all showing Dennis Fung collecting any of the, what's been referred to over and over in this trial as the Bundy blood drops?
Sustain what you
Is there any videotape at all showing Dennis Fung collecting any of the blood drops that are on the walkway leading to the rear alley at Bundy?
I don't believe so. None that I've seen.
And are there any videotapes at all showing Dennis Fung swatching any of the blood drops at Rockingham?
No videos that I have seen.
All right. So now focusing on Rockingham, ma'am. There's no videotape showing Dennis Fung collecting any blood drops there, correct?
Correct?
There's no still photographs showing him collecting any blood drops there, correct?
Correct?
And there's no documents that were made contemporaneous to this whole matter on June 13th or June 14th, which suggests that, which shows him swatching any blood drops at Rockingham. Is that correct?
Correct?
And so when you testified today, this morning, that it's your recollection that Dennis Fung collected items 4, 5, and 6, you're testifying based on memory. Is that correct?
That's correct?
Not based on any document, photograph, or videotape that you have seen showing him actually doing that. Is that correct?
That's correct?
And that recollection that you now have, ma'am, is in part influenced by the meeting that you had with Dennis Fung after you testified on August 23rd. Isn't that correct?
No.
At the meeting when you at the meeting you had with Dennis Fung, Ms. Mazzola, you said that Dennis Fung told you that it was his recollection that he collected items 4, 5, and 6, correct?
No.
During the meeting that you had with Dennis Fung after August 23rd, didn't he tell you what his recollection was as to which items he collected at Rockingham?
We were discussing the scene in general.
Ma'am, during that discussion, did Dennis Fung tell you what his recollection was as to which blood drops he collected at Rockingham?
I don't believe he said he recalled his recollection.
Well, ma'am, the last time, did anything happen? Since you testified on August 23rd, until you had this meeting with Dennis Fung, did you speak to anyone else about who collected which items at Rockingham other than Dennis Fung?
I don't believe so.
And did you review any photographs reflecting who collected which items at Rockingham between your testimony on August 23rd and the time you met with Dennis Fung?
I was able to review some of the still photographs.
But the still photographs don't depict, as you said a moment ago, Dennis Fung collecting anything, correct? At Rockingham.
overruled.
That's correct.
And the last time you were asked to articulate who collected what at Rockingham then was in sworn testimony that you gave in this courtroom on August 23rd, 1994. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And when you testified in this courtroom on August 23rd, 1994, you said that you personally collected every single one of those blood drops, including the Bronco door and the drops going all the way up the driveway at Rockingham. Isn't that correct?
Oh,
Isn't that correct, ma'am?
I don't know what the testimony was exactly.
Did you hear me read the testimony to you just 5 minutes ago, ma'am?
sustained.
Ma'am, when you testified on August 23rd, were you asked this question, did you give this answer? 698, line 22. Question. Okay.
This has been asked and answered.
Call roll, proceed.
Question. And what items of evidence did you collect, you personally collect, at Rockingham during that first visit? Answer, a red stain on the door of the Bronco and the red stains leading up the driveway to the front of the house. When you asked that question, did you give that answer?
Yes.
And you knew, ma'am, when I asked you at that time, when I asked you what you personally collected, you took that to mean those stains that you personally, with your own hands, swatched. Is that right, as opposed to someone else doing it?
Yes.
In fact, ma'am, at that meeting with Dennis Fung, by the way, do you remember when that meeting with Dennis Fung was had?
I have no idea.
What, was it a week after you testified? Was it the day after?
I do not recall.
Was it the same month?
I do not, excuse me, I do not recall.
Was it September?
I don't know.
Was it October?
All right, we're cumulative at this point, Counsel.
And ma'am, you made entries on that blank sheet during that meeting with Dennis Fung, didn't you?
Yes.
And the place where you made entries, ma'am, was in the column that said which item was collected by whom, correct?
Correct.
And have you looked at those notes with those entries that you made at your meeting with Dennis Fung at any time before you took the witness stand today to help you refresh your recollection?
By looking at that column, no.
Did you ever look at that column at any time prior to your testifying today to help refresh your recollection? Didn't look at it at all?
I don't believe so.
Now, other than your meeting with Dennis Fung and your meetings with Michelle Kessler, your supervisor, to discuss your involvement in this case, since August 23rd, have you had any meetings with representatives of the District Attorney's Office?
Yes.
And when was the first?
I don't recall when the first one was.
Well, would it be fair to say that there have been many since August 23rd?
There have been a few, yes.
Few? How
It
many
hasn't-
have there been, ma'am?
I don't know the exact number. It's not been every day.
Well, how many times have you met with the District Attorney's Office during the last 2 weeks?
Maybe 5 or 6.
And during the month of April in total, how many times have you met with the District Attorney's Office?
I have no idea.
Or would it be perhaps another 5 or 6 times?
I don't know.
Well, I just want you to approximate, ma'am, as best you can. Might it be an additional 3 or 4?
Could be an additional 2 to 4. I honestly don't know.
Okay. Now, during the month of March, did you have any meetings with any of the district attorneys?
I don't remember.
You don't remember whether you met with them or not during the entire month?
I had other work to do. I don't remember when I met with them exactly.
Did you meet with them at all during the month of February?
I don't recall.
When you say you don't recall, are you saying that you may have met with them, or you just have no recollection of the
I
encounter?
may have met with them. I don't recall.
What about in January?
I don't recall.
Does the same hold true for December? I'm sorry, you have to
Yes.
answer verbally.
Yes, it does.
And November?
All right, we're getting cumulative at this point again.
So would it be fair to say that you may have met with the district attorney's office during the months of November, December, January, and February, but at this point in time, you just can't recall if you did, and if you did, how often?
That's correct.
However, you know for sure that you met with them many times during the month of April. Is that correct?
I met with them sometimes in April, yes.
Well, you said, ma'am, just a moment ago that you met with him about 5 or 6 times during the last couple of weeks, right?
Some of that was on the phone. Some of it was all for 5 minutes.
And you said that you met with them anywhere from 2 to 4 times during the first part of April as well. Is that correct?
It's possible, yes.
So that could be as many as 10 times, just in the month of April alone. Is that correct?
Yes, possible.
Now, you mentioned that some of the sessions may have been on the telephone. How long was the longest session at the district attorney's office?
I have no idea.
Well, did you ever spend an entire day here? Looking at videotapes and talking to the district attorneys about your involvement in this case,
The major part of a day.
which would be perhaps 8 to 10 hours?
No, not that long.
Six.
Probably 5 to 6.
5 to 6 hours. And how many sessions did you have of that nature?
I don't recall, not many.
Perhaps 3 or 4?
Probably just closer to 3, 2 or 3.
2 or 3 sessions, which lasted about 5 hours. And at
Roughly.
those sessions, ma'am, which lasted 5 hours,
Mr. Neufeld, let her finish the answer.
sorry, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, I can't remember what you asked.
And at those sessions, which lasted approximately 5 hours, those 2 or 3 sessions, how many different prosecutors were with you?
It wasn't a solid 4 or 5 hours. It was on and off, sometimes watching videos. I don't recall who was with me or how many.
Okay, well, I take it if you don't recall how many people were with you, there was at least more than one prosecutor there with you.
Sometimes one, sometimes more than one.
Well, when there was sometimes more than one, were there as many as 3 or 4?
No,
So you're saying the most that you ever had at any of these 5-hour sessions was 2 prosecutors?
it's on and off.
Was Mr. Goldberg one of those 2 prosecutors?
Sometimes yes,
And sometimes there were other prosecutors there instead of Mr. Goldberg?
yes.
And who were the other prosecutors who you met with?
I don't know their names.
Well, were they people who were in this room?
I recognize one,
And who was that man?
the young lady sitting behind the audiovisual table.
Indicating Diane Martinez.
Okay. Were any of the other district attorneys who you see in this room present during any of those sessions?
They might have walked in and then stayed a minute or so and walked out.
But you don't have any recollection of any of those assistant district attorneys prepping you for your testimony?
No,
Did they at any time, did any of these district attorneys at any time take you into a courtroom?
no.
Now, ma'am, other than the notes that you described before that were made on June 13th and June 14th that you've reviewed in connection with this case, have you made entries onto any other notes at all, or those notes, to help you testify today?
No,
Are there any notes that you've made that are not your original notes?
Other than trying to condense some of the information so it'd be easier to find, no.
Well, you said you did make notes during your meeting with Dennis Fung, correct?
That was just what we had discussed on the collection by.
And those notes were made both on the Rockingham evidence collection sheets and the Bundy evidence collection sheets?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like permission to make a photocopy of those, if I may.
Certainly. Do you have those with you?
Yes.
All right. Mazzola, why don't you hand those to me? There are two groups.
Right.
All right.
Ma'am, during any of these sessions, by the way, when was the most recent session you had with the district attorneys?
This morning.
And did you meet with them yesterday as well?
No, actually, I didn't.
This morning?
This morning.
And before this morning, when was the last session?
Monday.
And
Or
during
Tues-
any of the sessions...
Excuse me, Tuesday.
And during any of the sessions that you had with the district attorneys, did they review with you any of the issues that came up during Mr. Fung's testimony?
Sustained. It's vague.
During those meetings with the district attorney's office, did either Mr. Goldberg or anybody else in that office tell you that there were certain problems with Mr. Fung's testimony?
Overruled.
I don't believe so.
Never mentioned that at all to you?
I don't believe so.